Imagine gathering, like, the absolute biggest political heavyweights in your country into one massive room.
Oh, yeah.
Flashbulbs are popping, delegates are cheering, and you have these towering figures standing shoulder to shoulder on stage, right?
Yeah.
They are projecting this image of an unstoppable unified force.
Right, the ultimate show of strength.
Exactly. But
Yep.
now imagine that the entire spectacle, I mean, every handshake, every ratified amendment, every single vote is legally invisible.
Wow.
Like, completely illegal. That is exactly what happened on April 14, 2026. And the fallout is, honestly, it's threatening to rip apart the opposition landscape.
It really is. The visual projection on that stage, it's just entirely divorced from the legal reality that's sitting in the courthouses down the street.
Yeah.
It presents a fascinating contradiction about how political power is actually manufactured.
It's wild. And to dissect how a contradiction of that magnitude gets built, we are pulling from a really fascinating stack of sources for you today.
Yeah, there's a lot of ground to cover.
There is. We are looking at excerpts from a comprehensive report titled The ADC Convention, A Defiant Path Toward the 2027 Coalition. And this includes ground-level reporting from Daily Trust, Daily Post, Channels Television, Punch, and The Cable.
Some really solid reporting in there.
Absolutely. So our mission for you today in this deep dive is to unpack a high-stakes game of political chess, institutional defiance, and, well, the sheer legal brinkmanship that could determine the survival of the Nigerian opposition ahead of the 2027 elections.
It's make or break time.
It really is.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
let's unpack this. We have to start by actually going to the room.
Right, set the scene for us.
So the date is Tuesday, April 14th, 2026. The location is the Rainbow Event Center in Abuja. And the sheer logistical gravity of this guest list is, frankly, staggering.
Staggering is the right word. I mean, the word miracle gets thrown around a lot in political organizing, right?
For sure.
But getting this specific group of egos into a single room simultaneously, it borders on a miracle. When you look at the names, Peter Obi, Atiku Abubakar, Rabiu Musa Kwankwaso.
Wait, Kwankwaso was there too.
Yeah, Kwankwaso, Rotimi Amaechi, and Rauf Aregbesola. These are individuals who have historically commanded their own massive competing spheres of influence.
Right, they are regional powerhouses.
Exactly. They usually run against each other. So to have them physically present, lending their silent or vocal endorsement to a single event, it sends a very deliberate signal to the ruling party.
It totally does. I was thinking about it like it's the political equivalent of getting 5 competing tech CEOs to suddenly announce they are merging their companies overnight.
That's a great way to put it.
Right. And the faction of the African Democratic Congress, the ADC, led by David Mark, they didn't just bring them there for a photo op,
No, they had an agenda.
a massive one. They were there to execute massive structural changes. They were ratifying a brand new National Working Committee under this grand unifying theme, which was so that Nigeria may work.
A very ambitious theme.
Very. And Emeka Ihedioha, the former governor of Imo State, he actually chaired the electoral subcommittee.
Right, I remember reading that.
Yeah. And he stands up and announces that out of 1,576 accredited delegates, 1,471 of them voted to amend the party's constitution.
Which is just, wow.
I know. That is a 94% approval rate.
Right, which is an astronomical number in any democratic setting. I mean, a 94% consensus doesn't usually signal organic agreement,
No, not at all.
It signals highly engineered alignment. What's fascinating here is the sheer visual power of what they achieved. This convention was designed to be the broadest gathering of the opposition coalition we have seen to date.
Absolutely.
By putting Atiku, Obi, Kwankwaso, Amaechi, and Aregbesola on the same stage, the David Mark faction is attempting a hostile takeover of the political narrative.
That makes total sense.
Yeah, they are bypassing the standard party machinery to declare, we are the definitive alternative for 2027.
But, projecting a unified front to the cameras, it only really works if the house behind you isn't actively on fire.
Right, and it was definitely on fire.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you look at the actual business conducted on the floor of this convention, that illusion of a 94% unified bloc starts to crack pretty quickly. You cannot genuinely claim to be a big tent unifying force while you are actively conducting brutal purge of your own leadership.
Yeah, the paradox of coalition building is playing out in real time right here.
Oh, for sure.
Uniting a massive external coalition, it often requires executing a deeply undemocratic internal purge just to ensure there's only one hand on the steering wheel.
Yeah, you have to clean house.
Exactly. So while the VIPs are posing for the cameras, the delegates on the floor are systematically amputating competing factions.
And let's actually look at the mechanics of that purge, because it wasn't some quiet committee decision behind closed doors.
No, it's very public.
It was done via voice vote on the convention floor. Senator Banos Yaro moves the motion, Representative Abdulsamad Dasuki seconds it, and suddenly key figures are just erased from the party roster.
Just like that.
It's just like that. And when we look at who exactly was expelled, it isn't just a random list of troublemakers. They expelled Nafiu Bala Gombe, who, claims to be the rightful factional chairman.
Right, a major player.
Yeah. They expelled Kenneth E. Hayter, the Alembia State chairman. And most incredibly, this blew my mind, they expelled Leke Abejide.
Oh, yeah, that was a huge move.
He is an actual sitting House of Representatives member for the Yagba federal constituency.
Grouping these expulsions reveals the underlying strategy, I think, that they aren't just removing dissenting voices.
Right.
They are deliberately dismantling regional power centers that refuse to bow to the David Mark faction.
Right. They're taking out the foundation.
Exactly. Expelling a state chairman like E. Hayter or a sitting federal lawmaker like Abejide, that is a calculated risk. You are intentionally destroying parts of your own electoral infrastructure to consolidate absolute control over what remains.
Which is wild.
It is. And the organizing secretary, Chana Duodigo, justified this to the delegates by claiming these individuals sowed discord and, quote, confused regulatory authorities.
Oh, man. That phrase, confused regulatory authorities, it is doing a lot of heavy lifting there.
It really is.
It brings us to the backstory of Nafiu Bala Gombe. He wasn't just some random dissenter who was unhappy. He was the deputy national chairman.
Right. He had a real claim.
Exactly. When the former chairman, Rauf Aregbesola, exited, Bala argued that the party's constitution mandated an automatic succession.
So he thought the job was his.
Right. He believed he was the legitimate chairman by default. And he didn't just complain to the press about it. Back in September 2025, he took the David Mark faction to the federal high court in Abuja.
Taking it straight to the court.
Yeah, he was trying to legally compel the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, to recognize only him.
His actions leading up to the convention were incredibly aggressive. By March 2026, just a month before this gathering, Bala and Leke Abejide actually led a physical protest to the headquarters of INEC.
Wait, a physical protest?
Yeah, they were right there. They publicly demanded that Atiku, Obi, Kwankwaso, and Mark stay completely away from the ADC.
That is so bold.
Right. From Bala's perspective, this isn't a coalition-building exercise at all. It is a hostile corporate raid.
Oh, I see.
He viewed these massive political figures as outsiders coming in to hijack the platform he was legally entitled to lead.
And if the situation wasn't tangled enough already, there's actually a third center of gravity here.
Oh, right, the third faction.
Yeah, the Dumebi Kichiku-aligned group. They operate on a completely separate trajectory, and they had just held their own National Executive Committee meeting, which was convened by various state chairmen.
It's just fractured everywhere.
Seriously. And Kenneth E. Hayter, the obvious state chairman who was just purged, he aligns with this third group. So I just have to look at this strategy and question the fundamental logic here.
How so?
Well, if the overarching goal is building an unstoppable electoral force to take on the ruling party in 2027, cannibalizing your own regional infrastructure and fracturing into three distinct factions seems like, well, political suicide.
It definitely looks that way from the outside.
Right. Like, you can't win a national election if your own state chairmen are fighting you in court.
The counter-argument from the Mark faction, though, would be that you cannot govern a fractured party anyway.
Okay, fair point.
Right. You have to establish absolute legal dominance before you can even begin to campaign.
That makes sense.
But that reliance on legal dominance is precisely where this entire grand spectacle hits a brick wall. Because a voice vote on a convention floor, it only has power if the state recognizes your authority to hold that vote in the first place.
Exactly.
And right now, the David Mark faction has no such recognition.
Which brings us to the actual mechanics of the Nigerian justice system. The ADC isn't just dealing with internal disagreements, right? They are trapped in a complete legal gridlock.
A total mess.
Yeah. This convention was held in direct, unambiguous defiance of two separate court orders. Let's start with Justice Joyce Abdulmak of the Federal High Court in Abuja.
Right, the status quo order.
Yes. In a suit filed by state chairmen against the Mark faction and INEC, she issued an order directing all parties to maintain the status quo. And here is the kicker. She issued that order on the very day of the convention.
The timing of that order is just a masterclass in weaponized legal strategy.
It really is.
In Nigerian political disputes, you often see this tactic where a faction waits until their opponent has committed massive financial and logistical resources, booking the stadium, flying in the delegates, inviting the press.
Millions of naira just spent.
Exactly. And then they secure a status quo order at the 11th hour. A status quo order effectively means the court is saying, freeze. Nobody makes a single organizational change until we resolve the underlying lawsuit.
Wow.
So by proceeding with the convention, ratifying a new committee, and expelling members, the David Mark faction didn't just ignore a judicial suggestion. They actively shattered a legal freeze.
It just seems insane to me that a judge would issue a freeze order on the literal day of the convention. The logistics alone of stopping a stadium full of people, that's impossible.
But you see, the impossibility is the point.
Oh, I see.
The opposing faction wanted them to proceed so they would automatically be in contempt of court.
That is brilliant and terrifying. Meanwhile, in a completely separate courtroom, Justice Emeka White adjourned Nafiu Bala's substantive suit indefinitely. He paused everything because he is waiting for the Supreme Court to rule on a foundational jurisdictional question. We really need to unpack what that actually means for the listener.
Right, so a foundational jurisdictional question means the court is debating whether it even has the right to hear the case in the first place before looking at any of the facts.
Okay, so it's a structural issue.
Exactly. In Nigerian jurisprudence, there is this long-standing debate about how far the courts can intervene in internal party affairs. Some judges argue that who runs a political party is a domestic matter, akin to a private club's rules, right?
Right, keep the courts out of it.
Exactly, that the courts shouldn't interfere. But others argue that because parties nominate candidates for public office, they are bound by federal electoral laws and therefore subject to judicial oversight.
That makes total sense, too.
So until the Supreme Court decides whether the federal high court even has the authority to intervene in this specific ADC civil war, every lower court is essentially paralyzed.
And that paralysis, it ripples outward to the regulatory bodies. Because of this legal chaos, INEC, the bodies that actually oversees and authenticates elections in Nigeria, they completely boycotted the convention.
They didn't show up at all.
Not at all. They didn't send monitors. They didn't record the votes. I like to think of INEC as the security server for the entire national election.
That's a great analogy.
Thanks. It doesn't matter if 1,500 delegates voted for you in a room.
Yeah.
If INEC's system doesn't recognize your faction's digital password, your entire party is locked out. You just get an access denied error on the national stage.
Exactly right.
Therefore, legally speaking, the April 14th convention is a phantom event.
That analogy captures the severity perfectly. The Supreme Court is the only entity that can force INEC to recognize a password, so to speak. And here is the timeline. The Supreme Court's 5-member panel, led by Justice Muhammad Garba, has granted David Mark's legal counsel, Jibrin Okutepa, who is a senior advocate of Nigeria, an accelerated hearing for April 22nd.
April 22nd.
Yes. The entire survival of the ADC rests on that specific date.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. The margin for error is essentially non-existent. Think about it like an action movie defusal scene where the timer is at 00.01.
It really is.
The Supreme Court hears the case on April 22nd. But the legally mandated window for INEC party primaries opens on April 23rd.
The very next day.
Literally the next day.
No.
If the Supreme Court takes even 48 hours to deliberate, or if they kick the case back down to a lower court on a technicality, the ADC enters the primary window without a legally recognized leadership.
Which is a disaster.
Total disaster. If INEC doesn't know who has the authority to sign candidate nomination forms, the party simply cannot field candidates.
This raises an important question, right, about the sheer weight placed on the judiciary in this scenario. It's monumental.
Oh, absolutely.
The courts are being asked to resolve an incredibly complex, multifactional leadership dispute within a matter of hours, with the entire democratic participation of a major opposition force hanging in the balance.
So much pressure.
The primary window closes entirely on May 30th. If this isn't resolved, millions of voters who might have chosen the ADC coalition in 2027, they will find their option erased from the ballot before a single vote is even cast.
And honestly, the existential threat of being completely erased from the ballot explains the boiling temperature of the rhetoric we saw at the convention.
It explains a lot, yeah.
When your entire political survival hinges on a 24-hour judicial window, the speeches are not going to be polite. But I want to be super clear here. Looking at this strictly as data, We are dissecting the political strategy and the temperature of the room here today.
Exactly. We need to be clear about that.
Right. We are not taking sides or endorsing these specific claims at all. We are just reporting what was said to show just how cornered the opposition feels.
Analyzing the rhetoric from that perspective, Rauf Aregbesola speech is incredibly revealing.
It was intense.
Very. According to Channels Television, he took the microphone and launched a direct, unfiltered assault on the current administration.
Yeah, he held nothing back.
He described President Tinubu's renewed hope agenda as a scam. He went as far as demanding that the president resign over the worsening insecurity and economic hardship, arguing that the administration was failing its fundamental duties.
Wow.
This isn't standard campaign rhetoric, This is the language of a faction that feels it has nothing left to lose.
And he also turned his sights directly on the Electoral Commission itself. Daily Post reported that Aregbesola called INA illegal and criminal simply because they boycotted the convention.
That's a huge accusation.
It is. He essentially accused the ruling party of weaponizing INA and orchestrating the entire internal crisis within the ADC just to bleed them dry in the courts.
And then David Mark, the man actually leading this faction, he utilized a different but equally intense framing.
What was his angle?
Well, Daily Trust reports that Mark stepped to the podium and framed this battle as a generational challenge. He told the delegates that what is at stake isn't just the chairmanship of the ADC.
Right.
He elevated the conflict entirely, stating that the very survival of Nigerian democracy is on the line. By framing it in such existential terms, he is attempting to guilt all opposition leaders, regardless of their specific party affiliations, into uniting under his umbrella.
So what does this all mean for you listening? Why should you care? Well, it is a masterclass in how fragile political reality can actually be.
It really exposes the machinery.
Right. We often think of democracy as this solid, immovable institution. But this scenario shows how institutional gridlock, weaponized legal timing, and intense factional infighting can completely break the machinery of an election. You have these towering political figures projecting immense physical strength in a stadium, while underneath, the foundation is tangled in injunctions and status quo orders that could wipe them out with the stroke of a judge's pen.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the contrast is just jarring. You have the visual triumph of Atiku, Obi, and Kwankwaso, signaling a massive coalition on one hand, and the sheer legal void of the ADC on the other.
Yeah, it's night and day.
Without INEC's recognition and without the Supreme Court's validation, that incredible show of force on April 14th remains completely invisible to the law.
A phantom powerhouse waiting for a gavel to fall. We want to thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep your eyes on that critical April 22nd date, because when the Supreme Court speaks, the entire landscape of the 2027 elections might shift in an instant. Keep questioning the mechanics behind the headlines and keep diving deeper.
But before you go, consider the very real personal domino effect of this political chess game. We talked about the expulsion of Leke Abejide.
Right, the sitting House representative?
Yes. Under Section 68, subsection 1G of the 1999 Nigerian Constitution, a lawmaker's seat is inherently tied to their party sponsorship.
No.
Yeah, so if the Supreme Court ultimately rules that the April 14th convention was legal, Abejide's expulsion from the party becomes legally binding. That simple voice vote on the convention floor would automatically trigger a constitutional mechanism stripping him of his federal legislative seat entirely.
It is heavy.
It is. When grand political heavyweights clash over the future of a coalition, it is the individual careers and local representation that can instantly vanish in the crossfire.